meeting one.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to understand. Oh, never mind. Now's not the time for
being
this.
told to shut up.
Let's go. Let's go. Cut.
So, welcome everyone to our first ISSessions meeting for the 2021-2022 academic year. My name is Nash. I am serving as the current president. I just wanted to extend a warm welcome to all the new faces that I see on the Discord channel, all the YouTube people who are watching, hello. It's always nice to see new people, to attend our sessions. Also, it's always nice to see familiar faces. And I urge for the new folks to really get acclimated with the Discord. It is a powerful community that we have to, be an accompaniment to your academic studies. The group and the community that we have right now, just a group of phenomenal people, all like-minded in the InfoSec world. Again, a warm welcome to everyone who's new. Before we get started with the agenda for today, I do want to just quickly give an introduction of ISS, our executives, and what our club is really all about. So just to get started, this is our team. As you can see, it's actually quite large in terms of an executive team for a student-based club. There are two main groups of executives that fill the responsibilities of our club, and I'll talk about both branches now. The first one is our content team, and that's comprised of Chillin, Hashir, Pablo, and Jackson. These are our content creators, and that team is actually run by Christian. And so the responsibilities of that team just really include everything that you see in terms of content. That includes putting out workshops, putting out the discussion segments, which we are going to run tonight. They also do the news. We do invite community members to give the news for us or with us. So if you are interested in presenting and want to work on your presentation skills, then that is actually a great opportunity to try and get involved. But that's sort of just a synopsis of what they do. I know I'm missing probably something, but these guys are always very, very busy. Next, we have our CTF team, which is comprised of Kyle, Min, and John. We also have Arvind, who is a newer addition to the team. Sorry, Arvind, if you didn't make it on the slide. And that team is run by Connor, and Connor is our CTF coordinator. For those of you who are newer or first year, who might not know what a CTF is, a CTF stands for Capture the Flag. And the easiest way to probably describe what it is, it's basically an InfoSec-centric hackathon. So we create challenges. Min and John and Arvin are challenge developers. So we create challenges, and it's focused really on beginners. So students, people like you and I, who are really interested in InfoSec, who want to learn something and really put that enthusiasm really in a competitive environment. And then we have Kyle, who is our infrastructure person. He is responsible for making sure that the CTF runs from an infrastructure perspective smoothly. And then Connor's role is really to make sure that everything from the CTF perspective all comes together with respect to making sure that the challenge team is well supported, the infrastructure is well supported, our sponsors are lined up. We do have sponsors that come out, and our sponsors are from the industry. and they do try to support us every year. So thank you for the CTF team. They are busy working towards our CTF, which we hope to have out. We're planning for February, but we will provide more information as time goes on. And then we have our support team, which is comprised of Jackson, Jack, who is running the stream right now. Hello, Jack. We have Jill, who is our community manager. She's the one who you've probably seen has been posting all the announcements for you guys to keep you guys aware. We have our vice president, Kurt, who is our previous president from last year, who did a phenomenal job. And then we have myself, who is the president. Essentially, my role is to make sure that all the teams are well supported and everything sort of stays on track. And so these two teams, or I guess 2 teams and the support staff, are responsible for our general mission statement. And what that mission statement is that we hope to develop a community of confident, skilled, well-versed information security professionals by creating a supportive environment conducive for sharing and learning. So ISSessions is a student-run club. We are all students, and we provide, a material for a student-based audience. And in order to accomplish that mission statement, we have provided our members with a lot of different areas where they can actually learn more about information security. This includes our Discord channel. If you take a look through our Discord channel, you'll see there is basically a channel for literally almost anything. So if you're new to our server, please take a look at all the different channels that we have. Feel free to leave a comment if you see something interesting. Respond. Just feel free to keep engaged as much as you can. Also, do keep in mind that our Discord server is or has students, but also professors, alumni, people from industry. So also be mindful of that when you post. This is sort of a professional environment in that sense. So I do want to sort of say that, be cognizant of what you put out there. We also have our ISSessions website, which is ISSessions.ca. We have our bi-weekly meetings during the course of the academic year. We try to run 2 sessions every month. We are cognizant of the fact that, our members are primarily students and the executives are students themselves. So there are periods where, we have exams and midterms. So we do try to adjust our schedule to accommodate those needs as well. I did talk about the CTF already. We also do workshops. A few weeks ago, we ran an obfuscation workshop, but we've also run workshops with regards to pandas. We did one on, it wasn't Kali, it was...
Arch Linux.
Say that again?
It's Arch Linux.
Arch Linux, that's what it was. Thank you, Kurt. So yeah, we do run workshops throughout the year. So please feel free to attend them. We will keep you informed of when those are running well in advance. Another thing that we put out last year is our CCR, which stands for co-curricular record. Essentially, that is sort of an account of your participation in the things that we put out. There is a minimum hour requirement for it. I did give a talk about the CCR and what is involved in that last year, so I'll put a link to that discussion in the chat later on during the session. You'll see the link for tonight will come out during the break. So if you're sharing soon, it's probably a good idea to fill it out. It's really an accompaniment to your coursework. It's not for an academic credit, but it is good for if you're applying to jobs, if you're applying to post-secondary education, like if you want to do, for example, your master's or something like that. It's really a record to show, you were engaged in, our club. And we do a news segment during every session that we have, and really the news is to keep you informed with what's going on in the InfoSec community. So again, welcome everyone who's new. I hope you take advantage of the things that we put out for you guys. And without further ado, we will get started on the news. I believe Jem's first.
Thanks a lot, Nash. And yeah, welcome to all the new faces. Super stoked to have you guys all join us tonight. Yeah, let's get started. So first news of tonight, the UN network gets hacked. Earlier this year, this actually didn't happen very recently, but the news are just coming out now about it. Earlier this year, hackers were able to get into the United Nations network and steal a ton of data. How they got in was actually, it was really, really basic. But just because it's basic doesn't mean that it's not important. This how basic it is actually shows how important user training and password strength is, and maybe even more importantly than that, how important it is. I keep saying important. I just noticed that, but how important it is to actually have MFA active on everything. MFA is multi-factor authentication, if you guys don't know. How the hackers got in was via stolen credentials, and these creds they purchased them off the dark web. The United Nations spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that the attacks have been detected and they're being responded to currently. The credentials belong to a UN proprietary project called Umoja, and that's a whole separate thing, which I'm not going to get into. But yeah, this Umoja project, the creds let the hackers get into even deeper parts of the network that had nothing to do with Umoja. Obviously, it's written in the article that this account did not have MFA enabled. The earliest access to the account was recorded on April 5th, and as of August 7th, the hackers were still active on the network. UN officials said that the attack was limited strictly to reconnaissance, but with the amount of data that the article says they stole, who knows what that information can lead to. The article actually spoke a little bit about this maybe paving the way for future attacks, but again, that's a different story altogether. Bloomberg investigated dark web ads. I'm not sure if that's the exact same sites that these hackers got the credentials from, but these dark web ads, there were at least 3 different marketplaces that had the exact same credentials listed for sale since July 5th, priced at $1,000. $1,000 to get into the UN. Mind-blowing stuff. Just mind-blowing.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey guys, I'm Pablo. For some of the first years, I think I've met some of you, so nice to see you guys. I don't know if this was mentioned before, but if you do have any questions or comments or anything, there is a designated chat above the ISS voice chat called Stream Questions. So that's kind of when we ever talk about anything in these meetings, please use that. But perfect. Going on to the article that I found, I kind of found it funny. Um, McDonald's email blast includes password to Monopoly game. I don't know if you guys know or collect it, but I know for myself. I collect the Monopoly cards that you get from McDonald's. Pretty much just to summarize it up, it's like a Monopoly board, but McDonald's is Monopoly is sponsoring McDonald's. So pretty much it's if you order a specific product from their menu, you kind of get a ticket, and that ticket can contribute to an actual prize or reward. But pretty much what happened recently is the franchise accidentally inserted passwords from McDonald's server to host information tied with the UK. This was in the UK, not in the States or Canada, unfortunately. But pretty much an email went out that had the passwords to the Monopoly database, to the actual prizes, which was kind of crazy. It was spotted by a researcher named Troy, um, along with some other techie dudes that actually were the ones that actually discovered this because the email came to them and they realized they won something. More in the article was if this were to get in the hands of someone that wasn't tech savvy or wasn't part of a research team, this could have gone really bad because they could have sold obviously all these codes for obviously a bunch of money just to obviously abuse McDonald's reward system. But they were lucky enough that the rewards and passwords actually landed in the hands of someone that knows how the breach happened and how to prevent it. So they reached out to, or they actually tweeted out to McDonald's like, "Hey McDonald's, I got this email with important credentials. Let me know if you want it or what should I do without it or what should I do about it." So this really wasn't anyone's fault. It was like human related security incidents. Um, you'll later learn on in your forensics class that human incidents are very common, especially in the tech industry. They're very hard to prevent, and you really can't do much about them. But yeah.
So next up is an article about Apple. There is an emergency patch that was released on Monday for iPhones, iPads, Macs, and Apple Watches discovered by Citizen Lab, which is an organization based out of Toronto, I believe, in February 2021. It's a fix for a zero-click, zero-day vulnerability exploited by the NSO group. The exploit was used to spy on Bahraini activists with Pegasus software and iMessage, and it's been dubbed the name Forced Entry or CVE 2021-30860. 9 Bahraini activists' iPhones were infected with Pegasus spyware between June 2020 and February 2001. The exploit was deployed against iOS versions 14 and 14.6 of avoiding Apple's new Blast Store sandbox feature. What's interesting is Blast Store was supposed to prevent this type of Pegasus attack as it's responsible for parsing untrusted data in iMessages. Pegasus is a powerful spyware. It can turn on target's camera, microphone. It records messages, texts, emails, calls, even if they're sent via encrypted messaging apps such as Signal. Pegasus is delivered via a malicious link that's been socially engineered to the target. The vulnerability is exploited and the device is compromised. Then the malware communicates back to the command and control server that gives the attacker free reign over the device. The vulnerability was discovered when examining the phone of a Saudi activist who requested anonymity. The NSO group is an Israeli spyware maker. The current exploit contains artifacts of Cascade Fall, linking them to the exploit. Cascade Fall is a bug where evidence is incompletely deleted from the phone's data usage.sql file. Another artifact pointing to the NSO group is the process named setframe, which is known to be used by the NSO. NSO claims that it only sells their software to intelligence communities within countries that have been thoroughly vetted for human rights violations, and accuses Citizen Lab of poor methods and motives. I guess it's a constant battle between the NSO group and all the other, InfoSec related organizations out there. They're sort of on the watch list.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. That was an unreal story. I also just want to quickly say, without rambling too much, in that article, and along with mine and another one of mine, and a lot of articles that you'll probably see at news during the news segment tonight or in upcoming meetings, there's going to be stuff that the newer guys, specifically the first years, you won't really understand some of the terminology. Maybe you'll see an acronym that you don't really understand. And while we try to break down as much as we can in the limited time that we have what all these different acronyms mean, I strongly recommend writing stuff down, like the acronym CVE. If you don't know what that means, maybe write that down and Google it. Citizen Lab, if you've never heard of that company before, maybe write it down and Google it. These are like crucial, very cool stuff also to look up and learn more about. I just don't want you guys to get overwhelmed and be like, what am I doing here? This is so technical. The stuff is meant like, it's broken down as much as it can be for y'all, but I really recommend just doing a little bit of research on your own and not kind of being, freaked out. That's I just wanted to say that because that talk was that story along with this upcoming one is a little bit acronym heavy, you could say.
Thank you actually for mentioning that. One thing, as you continue to see these terms used throughout the year, you'll become familiar with them. So it's also important, to not be bogged down by the terminology. So thank you, Jem, for mentioning that.
100%. I first started coming to this club before I was even officially in first year, and I didn't understand a word, like literally not a single word that was spoken. But I had my note app on my phone handy, and I wrote down every single term that I didn't know. And fast forward 2.5, 3 years, you know, it's you don't really think about it, right? But yeah, definitely don't get freaked out. On that note, Microsoft is patching a ton of CVEs, a ton of different bugs, and some of them are pretty intense. So this past Tuesday, during Patch Tuesday, Microsoft patched 66 CVEs. Out of these CVEs, the most high-profile one was a remote code execution bug in MS-HTML, which MS-HTML also is known as Trident, and it's a browser engine, to say the least, for their Internet Explorer browser. Believe it or not, this RCE has been under active attack for the last 2 weeks, and it's, you know, obviously 2 weeks doesn't seem like it's that long of a time, but 2 weeks in the wild is a long time for someone to be getting exploited. The attack itself, I quickly gleamed over the POC, and it's done via a macro attack where this is the part where it's going to start getting kind of confusing, but I can't be breaking down everything step by step. So just stuff like ActiveX, maybe write it down. A macro attack, write it down. That kind of stuff. But it's done via a macro attack where they craft a malicious ActiveX control, which is actually used by a Microsoft Office document. So this could be a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, that kind of thing. And from what I was reading, it looks like the most difficult part of this attack is actually just getting the user to open the malicious document. Like the attack itself was it seemed like it was very not that advanced at all, which is worrying. Attackers have been crafting POCs for this vulnerability. POC stands for proof of concept. For this vulnerability, allowing anyone to recreate the exploit within 15 minutes, as discovered by famous security blog Bleeping Computer. That's wild to me. 15 minutes to create this exploit. With the 66 CVEs that were patched this past Tuesday, security researchers are actually calling this a light Patch Tuesday, in contrast to the 8-month stretch of more than 100 CVEs per month last year. Or that shouldn't even say per month. That should say 100 CVE patches per Patch Tuesday, I believe. But anyways, the last 9 months, Microsoft has been patching fewer than 100 CVEs per month. So, like I said, security researchers are calling this a light Patch Tuesday. Out of the 66 patch this past this month, 3 are considered critical. There are other CVEs that Microsoft also patched this week, including a critical RCE among a bunch of other non-critical RCEs. I don't really know what makes the other ones non-critical, but there's just so much information. I couldn't dig deep into all of it. And there was a bunch of priv-esque stuff, a ton of privilege escalation CVEs that they patched. So yeah, wild.
Awesome. Oh, I love the cover for this one because it's a phishing scam. Perfect, cool. So the next one we have that I'm gonna talk about is pretty much a group of attackers trying to impersonate a DOT and 2-day phishing scam. As you can see from the photo, phishing, like you're phishing for emails or like you're phishing for fish. Anyway, pretty much what they did is the threat actors are impersonating the U.S. Department of Transportation, or as I'm just gonna say later on, the U.S. DOT or U.S. DOT. Pretty much what they did is they created fake federal sites, fake federal like government sites, and sent a massive email, including these domains that looked legit, like looked like a proper email. So people that worked at the company would be like, "Oh, this makes sense." It was counted that there was a total of 41 emails sent out to the victims. The crazy thing is that victims were told that the US dot would actually reach out to them. It just happened to be at the same time that the phishing emails also sent out. So therefore, many employees or victims didn't really see anything wrong with a recent email coming to them, because obviously when you're going through emails, sometimes you don't always check the domain to make sure it's the legit site, especially if you're being told, "Hey, I'm sending you an email, heads up." So that's kind of unfortunate for them. Pretty much, um, what the email contained is pretty much it was a bidding. um, Later on I'll talk about it was a bidding for a casino. Pretty much it was like the company was having a bidding site, and it was kind of like, hey, click here to bid just so you can be entered. Unfortunately, the phishing scam. That's how 41 people were attacked by this, saying, oh yeah, I was told about this. Let me click here to bid so I can make some money. Unfortunately, this was a fake email with a fake domain. The domain that was in the email is transportation.gov.net, but obviously when you first see that, it doesn't sound crazy, but when you really think about it, most government sites actually end with .gov, um, which pretty much makes it legit. So therefore, this had the domain was already non-valid. The full domain is there at the bottom, transportation.gov.bid, proceed, all that was actually led to a casino website, but unfortunately, the casino is what they think right now is either not active or it's been tagged, and they're just kind of using that casino name as their main domain, to kind of get these people into the phishing scam. So it's kind of unfortunate that the victims were told, "Hey, we're gonna send you an email." Um, I guess someone must have known that they were gonna send a massive email from corporate, so therefore they thought that, hey, if we send a phishing email, they're gonna think it's from corporate, and we're gonna get people to click. And unfortunately, people did click the link. Pretty much just to like always be careful with what kind of emails you get. Always double check the domain, making sure it's legit. But yeah,
So this one is for us students out there. It turns out that a master degree student in embedded system design in Britain, specifically the University of South Wales, hacked into a computer network and made thousands of dollars by selling the answers to exams. He's been sentenced to prison. Basically, a university mathematics prof became suspicious of what was happening, as he discovered that a number of students had answered exam questions with identical answers. The university processed about 140 million login records, and their investigation essentially led them to an IP address linked to residents in Tree Forest. It was determined that the student had acquired the login details of university staff using a key logging device and used them to access the network almost 700 times. The student downloaded 216 files from the university, which included exam papers, markings, reports, and coursework. And he sold those copies illegally that were illegally obtained and made approximately $27,000. Investigating the incident, however, and finding the culprit, implementing new security measures costed the university itself around $138,000. The student pled guilty to 2 counts of committing an act to impair reliability of data in a computer and 3 counts of obtaining articles by unauthorized access to computers. He was sentenced to 20 months in prison. So please, students, don't ever think of doing anything like this. Always use your powers for good.
Definitely not a smart decision to hack your school. Strongly would not recommend. Sweet. So Google is responding to a bunch of exploited 0 days in the Chrome browser. Google joins Apple and Microsoft in addressing and patching major vulnerabilities that are or maybe were now being exploited in the wild. CVE 2021-30632 allowed an out-of-bounds write in V8, which V8 is Google's open source JavaScript and WebAssembly engine. And CVE 2021-30633 allowed a use after free exploit in the indexed DB API vulnerability, which indexed DB API is a low-level API for client-side storage of a bunch of structured data. Again, definitely don't freak out. Just maybe write that stuff down and look it up. Yeah, these were both being exploited by not by Chrome browsers, but exploited in Chrome browsers in the wild. And the new Chrome version 93.0.4577.82 fixes at least 9 high severity vulnerabilities. So if you haven't already updated your browser, and I guess your Windows for that matter, yeah, get out there and update your stuff.
speaking of update your stuff, this one's kind of mostly towards iPhone users. Recently, dozen of iOS and Mac OS vulnerabilities, including several iOS bugged dubbed Wi-Fi daemon, which pretty much led to a denial of service for a lot of Apple products. pretty much how this attack worked was that um, any iPhone with Wi-Fi functionality that allowed to have access to join any public networks that weren't secure, as soon as they join, if the hotspot with an SSID containing the percent character, so for example, I put in there, if it contained a percent, pretty much iPhone's code would be unable to read this as a valuable Wi-Fi connection. So therefore, it was unable to establish Wi-Fi connection with it. So it's like, oh yeah, connected, but it wasn't actually properly connected. Um, Pretty much to fix this issue that you had with a lot of iPhones was um you'd have to go into like the Wi-Fi networks in your iPhone, including the rogue ones, and pretty much from all your ever known networks, you have to completely clear your entire Wi-Fi system. Pretty much this was kind of messed up because a lot of iPhone users like don't really check, and a lot of them, like I can say for myself and for my friends, that they kind of have the ask to join public networks instantly on, just so they always have Wi-Fi, just because they don't want to use data. So therefore, this could be a bad part because, if, for example, if there's an open Wi-Fi hotspot, anyone that really wanted to plant anything, this is kind of just common practice. You'll learn more about this later, like in your first, second year. But it's kind of common practice that never really join public open Wi-Fi's that aren't secure. Um, for reasons like this, someone can infiltrate any of the passing traffic between your phone and the Wi-Fi, especially if it's not encrypted. But this really affected at the bottom, kind of like the old iPhones and up. So pretty much iPhone 6. So wait, I would say like what's iPhone 6 a while ago, but iPhone 6 all the way up until now, including the iPads, the iPods, and the iPad. Yeah, even the iPods were also affected, but only the 7th gen and up. So really, if you had any old dinosaur of an iPhone, you'd be okay. But any of the newer recently with the new iOSs, you would actually be affected by this bug, which is kind of crazy.
And so for our last news story, this one comes out of the UK. There's 3 big UK brands that have been collectively fined nearly £500,000 by the privacy regulator after sending hundreds of millions of nuisance marketing messages to consumers. The company We Buy Any Car was fined £200,000 by the ICO after bombarding customers with over 191 million emails and 3.6 million nuisance texts. Saga Services and Saga Professional Finance was fined 150,000 and 75,000 in penalties for sending 157 million emails. These recipients did not give direct consent to receive any of these messages. The third company was Sports Direct, who was fined $70,000 after sending 2.5 million emails as part of their re-engagement campaign between December 2019 and February 2020. The recipients had not been contacted for some time, and the firm could not show any evidence that they received consent from the recipients. The ICO office tackles unsolicited marketing, irrespective of whether the message have been orchestrated by a small business or organization or a leading household name. Companies that want to send direct messages must first have people consent, and people must understand that what they are consenting to when they hand over their personal information. The ICO issues fines under the UK's Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation, or PECR, which governs the nuisance marketing messages and calls. Unlike the GDPR or the UK Data Protection Act, the maximum fine for individual companies via the PECR is 500,000. And so I believe that wraps up our news segment for tonight. Next up, we'll have our discussion segment, which is presented by our content team. So over to Hashir, Jackson, and Christian.
Thank you for that, Nash. Pretty much what we'll do is just continue watching Jack's stream, and Jack will shift over to mine. As soon as we're all good there, then we will start. All right, so welcome to our segment for tonight. Pretty much the way that these segments work is after our 30-minute of news stories, we move on to a segment which usually involves just a very specific topic in mind or a very specific event. With this one, we have our discussion night where we pretty much will have 2 prompts with questions, and we're pretty much going to see who agrees with what. So let's begin our intro to it. So pretty much the way it works is an article will be read out. At this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to keep it in like pretty much a point format just to save us time, and so that way we can actually focus on the topic at hand and hear what everyone what they think about said topic, which is the afterwards part, which is where the prompt will be featured. Audience will respond to the prompt with a specific format. This format will be yay or nay. We'll explain it in the next slide. And the executive team will look for those who want to discuss a specific point and invite them to elaborate further on mic. So if you'd like to speak more, so if you want to just keep your sentence short and sweet, but then elaborate further because you need that time, then we have an option for that as well.
So you can add required attendees for an event as well as optional attendees. So you could set a date.
Oh, what's that?
I think someone's not on. Yeah, there we go. All right, so pretty much with the way that we have our format is we have what you'll do is you'll start off with either an exclamation mark yay or exclamation mark nay. So the start of your sentence, if you agree with the prompt, use yay. If you disagree, use nay. So pretty much what happens is at the end we'll show up like this little graph to see where everyone agreed with something. And so if let's say 50% of people agreed and 50% people disagreed, you'll actually see a little pie chart that we have ready for that. So after you finish you either putting yay or nay, it'll come your argument or statement. Using the plus sign at the end of your sentence means that you'd like to hop on mic to elaborate further. An executive may call on you if you want to discuss further on mic. So let's say the prompt is tortellini is superior to ravioli. The first comment we have here as an example is yay, tortellini is smaller, and therefore you can eat more. So pretty much all what they're confirming is that they're pro the point that's being made. But if we look at the next point, it's exclamation mark nay, ravioli is bigger, making it better. So pretty much this means that this person disagrees with the prompt. Additionally, if you keep your eyes on the plus sign at the end, this means that this person wants to speak on mic. And depending on if the executive team calls on you, which will be me or anyone else for that matter, you can pretty much just feel free to unmute yourself. But if you want to, you can also type it out even further as well. We'll make sure to hit your point. So another thing that you can also do is you can use the Discord reply feature to respond to a specific comment from another person. We'll be sure to make sure that the format of all that is correct and everything. So pretty much what we'll do is we'll move on to our first prompt now, which is Steam gaming platform hosting malware.
Yeah. So the first story is like Christian said about Steam. So there's a new malware called Steam Hide, which has been discovered, and it uses Steam profile pictures to unpack its payload. So it does not execute from the image, and it has to have a malware loader to work. So while the technique is really just steganography, which is like the art of hiding stuff and other stuff, like hiding code or programs or whatever, it hasn't actually been done on Steam before. And so Valve, the parent company of Steam, has made no comment. And so this is an example of using a legitimate service to host malware, payloads, and other related attack vectors, which allow an attacker to hide themselves better while requiring less resources to create an attack. So they're using a legitimate service. So the moderators and administrators of the service are the only ones who get to take it down without any law enforcement intervention. So now that leads us into our prompt. So are companies responsible for hackers hosting malware / abusing their services and platforms? And if not, until one point, or is there a point that it's stopped? So everyone feel free, share your opinions. It can be crazy, controversial ones if you want. There's no judging. Feel free to elaborate more, turn on your mic. I see some people typing.
Always good when you see that several people typing during one of
Yeah.
these. This is how you know it's going to get spicy.
When it like promotes from like the X, and X are typing to several people, you know, that's good. So on some level, these platforms need to protect themselves and their users. Just for next time, just please use our format. Someone could, Christian, do you mind posting that in the chat?
Sure thing. I'll try to duplicate this, and I will put on a very.
Because we are doing. There's an
Here we
example for
go.
Kyle. Kyle.
I'll just copy and paste the format into a giant code block here.
Okay. So I
Alright,
believe
that
they
could
should
be
be
a little
responsible, but
messy,
only if they are informed. So Kyle, do you mean about the if the company's informed that there's an attack? Kevin says companies are responsible for making their products safe for users and to provide good reliability and provide a safe and trustworthy service to their customers. I think that makes sense. Hashir says to an extent, if companies provide the avenue for it, then it would make them responsible. Okay.
We have a yay from Abdul who says yes, they should make more effort to protect users. Another yay from El Penguino. Yay, companies should always protect their users.
This one doesn't seem to be so controversial, but I'm sure all the several people typing might disagree. Yes.
We have another yay from Maze VGM.
Please talk about it on mic.
So Maze VGM, yay, it's a company's job to moderate what goes on in their site, followed by another yay by Thraki. This is really just another form of content moderation. And if they're being used to disseminate malware, they need to sort that out. Another yay from Navi. If I am signing up for something, I expect to be protected.
I think this one's kind of a bit one-sided.
Yeah, pretty cut and dry.
I don't think we'll have to look at the graph of responses afterwards. So companies are responsible for the content they host. If they're hosting malware, they have the responsibility to make sure it's protected and that their customers are protected. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Jill's coming in with the devil's advocate. Let's see. They should make sure their security is strong enough to protect themselves and users. Agree with what everyone has said. Fair. So here's a nay. If the hackers are just that good, what can they do? The company is already as secure as they can. So yeah, if a company gets attacked and it's some kind of new attack and an unknown vulnerability, then some way it's a little harder, but they should try to make it as secure as they can. That's true. Steam is a publisher, not a platform. So it's not necessarily people posting content. It's yeah.
From Todd, yay, especially in the case of closed source supply chains. The organization that is responsible for the supply chain's usage in regular operations is definitely responsible for the security of its channels.
That's a good point. You might not be able to blame them, but it's also their responsibility. So you can't necessarily say like it's your fault I got attacked, but they say like it's your responsibility to fix it and like make it it's your responsibility to fix it and make sure it doesn't really happen again.
Yeah, we'll probably change this one over into our next prompt since this one's a pretty cut and dry yay for
Yeah.
most people. All right, we'll just give a second for the last messages to come through, and then we'll move on to our next prompt. Oh, we got an in between here, which is from Navap, who says, "Who gets to define what abuse is?"
That's true. I get it. Yeah. I guess it depends on the company's terms of services. Like, if somehow they have looked, if somehow they have like totally like missed it, and they have this loophole that technically people are allowed to store things in profiles, then yeah, I guess that's their bad.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly reset the bot here, and we'll move on to our next point. We're just going to see a very big orange graph here, or blue, I guess, in this case. But yeah,
92.3. Yes. That's pretty one-sided, if I do say so myself.
it's just a little, just a little. All right, so we'll move on to our next prompt, which is public sector, another vulnerable target to attackers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Might need to raise up your mic's volume a little bit, though.
Okay, I will do that real quick. Is this better?
A little bit, but you should be good to go.
All right, perfect. So, hey everyone, I'm Hashir. I'll be taking on the second discussion prompt, and it's based off this interesting article that goes over the SolarWinds cyber attack that was announced by FireEye. It was announced in December of 2020 and is one of the largest cyber attacks in history. And the main point from this article was the damage done to the ones who were attacked, which were public sectors. So, what happened? Well, what happened was that hackers carried out a supply chain attack that allowed them to infiltrate the IT systems of many private and public sector organizations. And this was possible by injecting code into SolarWinds Orion platform. Those private and public sector organizations include, for example, local, state, and federal government agencies within the United States, national and Atlantic Treaty Organizations, European Parliament, including the United Kingdom government, and several private companies, which makes the SolarWinds breach huge due to the number of United States, NATO, and European governments affected. Now, an important thing to mention is that a report by Verizon in 2019 noted that 47% of public sector attacks were not detected until years after their initial date. This is relevant because for this one, it took 9 months alone for this attack to be detected in the United States, making it one of the worst cybersecurity incidents of all time. Now, in regards to the public sector, I found it important to mention the type of information that is held in these organizations, such as social security numbers, health information, insurance numbers, financial information, trade secrets, other intellectual property, other personal IDs of students, employees, different types of citizens, etc. It's basically all the government information. So stuff that shouldn't be leaked, but this stuff is leaked for a variety of reasons. To put it simply, there is a need for more investing towards public sector security resources. And due to the lack of funds, we see many cybersecurity vulnerabilities in public sectors such as outdated infrastructure, which is the main thing. And a study has been done on this by Deloitte, and NASCIO reports that indicates that only 36% of states have a dedicated budget towards cybersecurity. Now, the final point to conclude is that when public sectors work towards or adopt new methods of securing their organizations and data, many popular security solutions may not be from the government's own country. This brings security and espionage concerns due to adopting methods from outside their own government, and it can leave many parties concerned, including citizens. So let's actually address the prompt. Could you switch to the prompt? Yeah, so should the public sectors have special privileges to bypass the regular means of legislation to combat the fast-paced world of information security? All right, let's see.
Now, this one I think is going to get really spicy for some people.
Define special privileges.
I guess in this case, what we're pretty much going to say is like pretty much anything that it comes to like, passing bills or performing actions, because as we know, the public sector usually takes a lot longer to do that because it has to pass through, you know, a lot of different parts of house, as if they could pretty much make their own decisions separate of that.
Like wouldn't the decisions also include like how they collect your data and for like the sake of security and how they control your data and how it's managed?
I guess yes and no. It all depends on what extent you want to bring your point to.
Mhm. And that also includes being free to collaborate outside of their own countries.
All right, so we're starting to see our first responses. Nay from Navap, special, regular. These are all very hard words to define. Another nay from El Penguino, which is that they agree with Pavan. And define a way that is consistent and result in expected outcomes. Why would they need special privileges to be more secure? From Thraki. I would say if you believe that, for some people, they believe that things are a little slow when it comes to passing it. If you agree with that, then this might be something that people would want to see. But if people disagree and they think it should just be, when it just comes to like the practicing kind of portion. All right, we're starting to see a lot of all right, nay from Kyle. If the law doesn't apply to everyone, it applies to no one. Laws are meant to protect the people, and if some can circumvent, then it's a slippery slope to the bottom of people's rights. Nay from Todd. There are circumstances that will require faster action than ordinary bureaucracy might facilitate, but that doesn't mean that you can introduce subjectively into these kinds of formalized legislative processes. Abdul with our first yay. Yes, if it's an emergency. So this would be in case of an invasion, as an example that he puts. Nay from Jill. Laws are put in place for protection of everyone. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you should be able to bypass laws, but that's a whole other thing. A nay from Jackson. These privileges would need to be legislated, which would take a long time, or just be very vague and have loopholes. Another nay from Joel. We have all seen the legislation that's been proposed lately in public sector, and I have a hard time trusting them not to abuse it to pass illegitimate legislation under the guise of a good thing. Our second yay from Kevin. It is important to do whatever means necessary to deal with different situations and the rising threat of cybersecurity. Attacks improve, the processing against these are behind. Captain Tom with an A, special privileges are never a good thing as far as legislation goes and often leads to exploitation. A nay from Abdul, otherwise I would say no, work on speeding up legislation instead of bypassing. A nay from Johnny, special privileges are just another word for bypassing ingrained processes and operations. Procedures exist to prevent accidents and misuse of authority, which is what having special privileges is a concept that the public sector should consider carefully before actually implementing. Nay sets a bad precedent from Mo. Nay from Thraki, liability in software development would be far more powerful. That's actually something that I forget what it was, but I remember that the United States was actually putting in massive measures after the SolarWinds breach to actually hold software developers a lot more responsible when it comes to the public sector, or at least when it comes to software that's being used in the public sector. If anyone knows a little bit more, feel free to elaborate on that because I think that's also an interesting discussion. Nay from Kaya, legislature is a check and balance. What needs to happen is for legislation to be adapted more to potential future situations. We have an in-between from Navi. Similar to what Abdul said, it depends on what the situation is. Otherwise, I'd say nay. K Phantom says nay, since the use of special could mean that all normal user could have data taken and abused while the private sector would not be reached, in the case of the US with lobbying. This one isn't a yay or nay, but from Thraki we got a pretty good point. Watch Dan Gear's Black Hat keynote from a number of years ago. He mentions we're the only industry where nobody is held liable for building a shoddy product. Ooh, that one's definitely a good point indeed. Anything you want to bring up at all right now, Hashir? Anything that
These are pretty good responses. I'm looking at Kev's response, just thinking about that. Like he's mentioning how it feels like an invasion or civil war. Even though it's like pretty rare, I still think that's kind of justifiable in my opinion. I mean justified. But yeah, interesting responses from everyone.
We have a nay from Trevor. Special privileges within an emergency never have an expiry date. Once they are given, they aren't taken back so easily. I don't see amount of special privileges that make anyone 100% safe in information security. Only time versus reward. All right. Oh, and Tharaki posted the keynote there, so I guess I will. Yeah, let's. So since this is probably going to get mixed up in a lot of the messages, if anyone wants to check that out later, I'll actually pin Tharaki's video that he just posted there. So you can just come back, click the little pin icon, and you can check out the video he sent there. All right, so I think with this one, it's pretty cut and dry. So what we'll do is we'll just pop up the graph that we got over here, and then we will head into our break shortly after that. So for this one, it's pretty much the complete opposite of the other one. Instead of blue being the dominating color, we now have orange being the dominating color. But it seems like most people are in agreement with one another when it comes to these prompts. So I guess we'll wrap it up with here are the articles that are used. Feel free to check them out later so that way you can actually see some maybe because some of these are with discussion nights. We try to pick out opinion columns. So if you want to see up some points that the person who made the article had, it's always great to check that out. So thank you for participating in today's discussion night. It was great to see how much conversation we had, despite the fact that most people kind of agreed with each other.
I mean, still, sometimes it's good to kind of, for education, to kind of figure out some different points you might not have thought of, even if it's
For sure.
believe it.
Yeah, definitely. Some really interesting points I think some people have made.
And we did this last time too, but shout out to Nash and Kyle for making this awesome discussion bot that we're using. It's all them.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. So what we'll do, we'll take about a 10-minute break. Go grab coffee, some water, whatever you want to do. Use the washroom. We'll be back around 8:12 for our next segment. 2015 and is currently a vulnerability researcher and team lead with Trend Micro. He started his career with a co-position in Deloitte and stayed on board after graduation, working in security operations center, engineering, and vulnerability assessments as penetration testing. In his current position, John reverse engineers vulnerabilities to write proof of concept exploits and devise network detection strategies to catch exploitation attempts. During the last 5.5 years in his current role, he has discovered several new vulnerabilities, authored blog posts for Trend Micro and Zero Day Initiative, and spoke at several conferences. So John is definitely a powerhouse, and we are definitely grateful to have him present for us. So I hope everybody, one, pays attention and enjoys his talk. So take it away, John. No, it's not.
All right, I think I have voice.
There we go. Can hear you now.
Okay, lovely. And you may hear a dog barking, but
No worries.
that's okay. Okay, so hey everybody, thanks for joining us this evening, and excellent work to the executive team so far. I'm always super impressed to see where everyone has taken sessions to over the last few years. You know, when we started it out, it was like, you know, maybe 4 or 5 of us in S302 every once in a while, just kind of having a chat. And so to see this is pretty amazing. So excellent work to all of you. So anyways, let's get into it. So this is my annual talk. I do revise it a little bit, and yes, Pavan, I do revise more than just the year on the title slide. So let's get right into it. So first things first, this was already kind of said at the beginning of the news segment or partway through the news segment. You know, I may use words and terminology in this presentation that you're unfamiliar with. I have tried to make sure that I use as little industry terminology as possible. It is sometimes unavoidable. If you do need me to clarify something or explain something further, please ask. Don't put your hand up or come talk to me after, because that would be really weird since I'm at home. Clearly, I didn't change that slide. So yeah, just give me a message or just mention something in the chat, and I am keeping an eye on it. So if there's something you're unclear on, just ask and I'll see if I can answer it. All right, so who am I? Kind of went through it a little bit. I'm Thraki on Twitter and here, obviously. I graduated class of 2015 from the program. I'm currently a team lead and vulnerability researcher at Trend Micro in Toronto. My experience has included defensive and security operations center type work, as well as penetration testing and vulnerability assessments previously. And even before that, I did a lot of general IT, tiny bit of development work. And before that, in my previous life, I was a nationally ranked figure skater and coach. Currently, I'm a fur parent to 2 rather chunky cats that had to go on a diet, and an evil but adorable corgi. And if you feel like it, you can follow him on Instagram and see him chase me around with his Furminator. So what are you doing here? Well, the information security industry is huge. We're just going to call it InfoSec for the rest of the presentation for the sake of time, and because that's pretty much everyone calls it. I only really knew about ethical hacking as a possible career option when I started at Sheridan, and to be honest, I didn't really know what it was. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through as much industry info as possible, potential employers, job roles, learning, info resources, and some non-technical career advice. And as always, I will make the slides available. So there's a ton of different career options out there within the industry. So we're going to kind of categorize this, try to categorize this in a couple of different ways. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to categorize it by who you can work for. So first off, you have the consulting firms. So this is very client-focused work, and you may hear the big four term thrown around, and that refers to Deloitte, PwC, Ernst & Young, and KPMG. Those are the big four accounting and auditing firms, but they tend to be just kind of the big four consulting firms in general. So there's also a number of boutique InfoSec only firms, such as Security Confidence, which is Toronto-based, and we have a lot of alumni working there. Go Secure, Mandiant, which is a division of FireEye, just to name a few. You can also work for security vendors. So security-specific vendors like, for example, Trend Micro, Symantec, FireEye, and there's other vendors that do a lot of security stuff that maybe aren't primarily security, but it's a heavy part of their business, like Cisco. So Cisco is primarily a networking company, but firewalls and security and that kind of stuff is obviously a really big part of their business. So there's more. In-house security teams. So that's doing security-related stuff for one company. Mostly large organizations, smaller ones don't have budgets for security teams. They tend to kind of farm that out, which we'll talk about in 2 seconds here. Telecom companies, banks, insurance companies, tech companies, etc. These all have internal security teams that you can work for. Government, CSIS, which is our CIA, CSE, which is our NSA, both constantly hiring. If you're not a Canadian citizen necessarily, your own countries that you are a citizen of are also likely hiring, cyber professionals as well. So that's definitely an option too. Military and police, again, everyone needs InfoSec expertise these days. And then there's also academia. So Sheridan's always looking for experienced professors, and they're obviously not going to be the only one. This usually does require a master's degree as a bare minimum typically, and it's usually probably best to have some industry experience beforehand so that you can actually speak from that place of experience. And there's lots of long-term research opportunities. So Citizen Lab came up. Obviously, they had disclosed the existence of that iOS zero-day exploit. And so Citizen Lab is actually a division of the University of Toronto. And so they research the intersection of basically cybersecurity and human rights, which is really, really cool. So, if you're really passionate about something like that, that's something to kind of shoot for. That's more of kind of like a PhD level kind of thing. So that'd be something that, you'd have to kind of build up to. So, that's basically the rundown of, the different sort of types of companies you can work for, types of organizations. So what can you do with those companies? So there's a lot of different subfields. I really can't cover all of them. And honestly, there's new ones popping up all the time. So, I may be leaving some kind of new hot ones out, to be honest. But we're going to go over kind of the core ones. So Leslie Carhart, also known as Hacks for Pancakes, she has a pretty awesome rundown on her blog. It is from 2015, but honestly, it's still really good, relevant info these days. But we're going to kind of follow Leslie's lead. We're going to split these into offense and defense. And, take what I say with a grain of salt. I've never worked in most of these roles before. So, I'm only speaking from, what I know based on talking to people, based on reading and that sort of stuff. So on the attacking side of things, okay, it's not really just attacking, but this is what we kind of tend to call offensive security. So this may also be referred to as red team. The term red team is a bit overloaded. If you want to get in an argument on the internet, just say something about red team, and then people say, oh, that's not red teaming. So, offensive security is a pretty safe way to term it. So penetration testing, and this is what everybody kind of, gravitates to on the offensive side for the most part. And basically your job is to simulate a real attack on a well-defined target. And this is known as the scope. So, in this kind of work, you're going to be consulting for clients or doing internal testing in large organizations. And we're talking big organizations. So like Amazon, they'll have internal red teams or internal, offensive security teams. There are general penetration testers, and there's also people who specialize in things like industrial control systems. So Dragos Incorporated is a company that basically specializes in exclusively in industrial control systems, security, and so their pen testers specialize in that sort of niche. There's an extremely wide variety of work here, even on the same team from week to week. You might be asked to test a single web application 1 week, and then the very next week you're doing like a no holds barred test everything you can get your hands on the next week. This may also include physical security testing. You may be asked, hey, we want to see if you can get into our building, or if you can get past our cameras, that sort of stuff. What kind of skills are required? Broad knowledge of a lot of stuff. Operating systems, network protocols, programming languages, all the kind of, the stuff that we do learn in the program. It can all be applied to pen testing. Problem solving skills. Google can only take you so far. At some point, you encounter things that Google doesn't have an answer for, and you need to be able to sort of systematically figure out how to solve that. And patience. So, you're going to spend a lot of time waiting for stuff, whether it's waiting for clients to give you the approval to do something, whether it's waiting for, a long-running scan to finish. There is a lot of sitting around and waiting. And so, don't expect that it's going to be all, Hollywood-like, where, things are flying all around you, and, it's not the Matrix, unfortunately, as much as I wish it was. So a few things to be aware of. Your testing scope is often going to be really narrow and strict. So, you may have to ask the client permission before actually testing an attack on something that you think is vulnerable to a particular attack. There may be a lot of travel, which can be good or bad, depending on you and your life situation. For me personally, I don't want to do a ton of travel just because of, where I am in my life. But for some people, hey, they want to travel like crazy. They love the business travel, and, that's great. You will be writing reports constantly, and you're going to deal with a lot of red tape. That's just the reality of the job. You can't just go around willy-nilly, hacking everything you see. There's very strict protocol when you're in this kind of work for the most part. So sort of attacking. So vulnerability research, and this is what I do. So vulnerability is a flaw in a piece of software that might allow an attacker to do something they're not supposed to do, or they're basically not supposed to be able to do. So they can gain information, they can execute code, they can disrupt the service, etc. So for those of you that are new, there's the whole CIA triangle, which is confidentiality, integrity, availability. Basically anything that an attacker could do to affect one or all or more of those particular things in that triangle. So there's several varieties of vulnerability research. So there's zero-day research, which is looking for new vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities that no one has publicly disclosed yet, or disclosed to outside a group of people. End-day research is understanding and figuring out how to exploit reported and known vulnerabilities. There's exploit development, which is creating functional exploits using vulnerabilities. And so the difference there, the end-day research is, okay, what's the flaw in the software, and how could I at least prove that the flaw is there? Exploit development is, okay, I can prove the flaw is there, but I can't really do that much beyond just saying, oh, I caused the program to crash. Exploit development is I've gone now from being able to crash the program in a controlled way to I can now make calculator pop up on your screen. And so that's the big difference there, and they're quite different in terms of the type of tasks you do. And then there's also bug bounties. So this is hunting for vulnerabilities in a specific organization's applications or sites, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. So vulnerability research is often very specialized. You can do mobile, web-based, Internet of Things, embedded systems, etc. So there are a lot of people who really specialize in that. What kind of skills do you need? A lot of fundamentals and an insane desire to solve puzzles. CTFs are a great way to get into this, and again, more on that in a bit. You need to read and understand assembly, a wide variety of programming languages, network packet captures. You need to be comfortable with reading spec documents. So if you're encountering a network protocol you've never worked with before, you need to be able to go and dig up the specification and be able to read through that and understand it and correlate that to what you're looking at. Security vendors tend to employ the largest number of vulnerability researchers. There is, of course, kind of what I kind of call the gray side of vulnerability research is, especially in the United States, there's a pretty big demand for exploit development when it comes to, literally like creating quote unquote weaponized exploits for use for who knows what. There are ways in vulnerability research to make money independently as well. You can sell zero-day vulnerabilities to organizations like Zero-Day Initiative, which they are part of Trend Micro, who I work for. There's gray market vendors such as Zerodium. So those typically require a fully functional exploit where, okay, I'm going from, a perfect example of a fully functional exploit is the iOS one that was patched. That is a fully functional exploit, and a company like Zerodium would buy that and then, as a broker, sell that to organizations, like NSO, for example. And I think it's really important, just from kind of like a moral standpoint, be aware of what might happen with your vulnerability when selling it. When you sell a vulnerability to someone like Zero-Day Initiative, their job is to then report that to the vendor and get it patched, and they'll pay you for doing that. Zerodium, you have no guarantees, what your discovery is going to actually be used for. So, just keep that in mind. Bug bounties. So bug bounties allow you to legally hack participating organizations and get paid if you find something of consequence. Some organizations run their own programs. Others use third parties like HackerOne and BugCrowd to facilitate. Rule number one, if you're going to participate in a bug bounty program, is don't be a jerk. When you are submitting a bug bounty, ask yourself these things. Is there an actual security impact worth submitting? Again, CIA triangle. Is something in that triangle been affected? Okay, you possibly have something. If you're curious, you can go look at past submissions on HackerOne and BugCrowd. They don't open up all of them publicly, but there's a lot of them that do get disclosed publicly. Is the bug in scope according to the terms of the bug bounty program? So are you attacking a site that you're allowed to be attacking? Do you have a detailed report and a proof of concept that would allow the organization to easily and reliably reproduce the vulnerability? If you made it happen just like one time by accident and you can't do it again, that's not something you should submit. It needs to work 100% of the time, like 99% of the time. It is not easy to make a living by North American standards, living on bug bounties alone. So Duo Security did a study, I think it was 2018 or so, and at the time, 97.5% of researchers on HackerOne never sold a bug. 0.3%, roughly 1,000 researchers, have made $500 or more total, and 0.03% have earned 100 grand or more. So those are really, really like tiny numbers in terms of people who are making a decent living from doing bug bounties. But it's not bad for a little side cash, that's for sure. On the defendant side, so these are kind of what we tend to call blue team roles. You're there to stop and find the bad guys. So one of the number one jobs that probably half of your graduating class is going to wind up getting into, half your co-op job is going to be security analyst. This is basically the most common entry-level role. Typically, you'll be working in a security operations center, also known as a SOC. You may work in-house security team for a large organization like banks and insurance companies, as I mentioned before. You may also work for what's called a managed security services provider, an MSSP. These are typically consulting companies. Some of the security focused companies will do this as well. You'll do things like you're monitoring security logs, you're working with security information and event manager products. You're going to respond to potential security incidents. As you get more experience, you get to do things like a little bit of malware analysis for any malware that may show up on your network. You get to do proactive threat hunting, so you're looking for things that aren't being actively detected by all your other stuff in your network. And you get to be more involved in improvements. Entry level can often consist of shift work. That's just kind of how it goes at first. But not every entry level security analyst role will have that. What kind of skills do you need? Basics in networking, operating systems, tiny bit of programming to make your job easier. If you need to automate a few things here and there, being able to write a quick shell script or a little bit of Python code to automate something, it can be really, really helpful. Patience is a big thing. You know, a lot of times you're going to be waiting around for something to happen, and you know, it can get boring. You also really, really, really need rock solid communication skills. You have to be able to communicate clearly what's happening and the potential impact of what's going on. If you can't communicate clearly about what you're seeing, what you're observing, then you know you're not going to get people above you to buy in on taking action that may be necessary. So be aware. In general, defending is a really difficult job. Offensive teams get that kind of instant dopamine hit when they're successful. For blue teams, not so much. Threat hunting, maybe. But when it comes to kind of your standard security analyst role, you know, when nothing is happening, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're secure. So this is a job where it's like a starting point for a career. Make sure if you're going to work for an organization as a security analyst, make sure they offer you a clear path for career progress. You do not want to be stuck as a security analyst forever. Well, I shouldn't say you don't. Maybe you do, but in general, most people don't. Every company that has a security operations center is hiring, every single one of them. So, you know, if that's kind of the direction you want to go, you will find work, I guarantee. Then you can kind of get into, you know, not necessarily red team, blue team, but you can get into doing things like building and maintaining defenses. So security engineers are people who, you know, manage firewalls, intrusion detection, and intrusion prevention systems. There's the barking. Security information and event managers, endpoint security solutions like antivirus and all that sort of stuff. It's hard to keep up on all the different, you know, flavor of the month in terms of, you know, different sort of things that are going on. These are the people that keep the security operations center running smoothly. Sales engineers kind of also fall into this, but in general, sales engineers are mostly helping integrate, you know, the products of the company that they work for. More experienced security engineers can become security architects, where you're kind of doing like bigger picture stuff. How do all the pieces fit together? This is very much sysadmin type work. So, you know, what kind of skills? You really need to know your way around a command line interface. So, you know, Linux, PowerShell, etc. And probably some more esoteric stuff like, you know, mainframes and Solaris and etc. You do need fairly deep knowledge on a variety of operating systems. Programming knowledge will definitely help. And sometimes you'll also need technology-specific experience or certifications. But a word of warning on that. So Leslie mentions this in her blog post that I linked earlier. Try not to get locked in by only working with a single vendor's products. You know, obviously, if you work for a vendor, you kind of have to, you know, you have to learn how to use their products because you're probably selling them or working on them or working with them. But oftentimes you'll have to integrate with other vendor stuff. So you at least have an opportunity to kind of learn about other products. But this is important because if you, you know, you put all your eggs in the, you know, the basket of one vendor who right now is really hot in the flavor of the month, you know, 2-3 years down the line, maybe that vendor just isn't really a player anymore. And, you know, now all that is kind of gone, and you've got to now recertify with a totally different vendor. So, you know, just be aware of that when you're getting into that sort of a situation. Now, what happens when companies get owned? Well, you call in digital forensics and incident response people, also known as DFIR. So you can be a forensic analyst. So you may be, for example, recovering data to figure out how a device was compromised or abused, or you may be recovering evidence to use in legal proceedings. This is also known as e-discovery. You use a lot of forensic-specific tools for analyzing drive images, memory dumps, etc. Consulting firms do provide this, and larger organizations do have in-house forensics teams as well. What kind of skills? Extensive understanding of operating systems at a bare minimum. You need to understand how data is stored on disks and in memory. So you get into the kind of that really specific low-level stuff. And guess what? Whole lot of patience. Nick will have some great stories about, you know, how long things take. And, you know, there's a lot of sitting around just waiting for stuff to happen. I think most sort of, you know, incident response and, you know, forensics people have like a game console kicking around because it gets played a lot while they're waiting for things to happen. If you really like looking for the needle in the haystack, this may be the thing for you. Okay, incident responders, similar, but in this case, you're figuring out how to deal with an incident and help coordinate the resolution. So you're building a timeline of what happened in order to fully resolve the incident and determine the effects. You're going to coordinate the response with all the relevant parties. Similar set of employers as a forensic analyst. Skills, communication skills, actually, I would say are almost the most important thing here, because you're dealing with a stressful situation all around, and you need to be exceptionally clear, and your communication has to be spot on. You do share some technical skills with forensic analysts, but it does require that you can sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together. So link different pieces of evidence and say, okay, it went from here to here to here. So be aware, incident response can be very high stress. You can pull some long and weird hours and likely will require travel. Same thing does apply for a forensic analyst as well. And if you're really just, you love code, you love programming, but you kind of want that security angle, you have application security, also known as AppSec. The industry needs programmers that can help create more secure software, not just write secure code. Your job is to help ensure that everything is developed from the beginning with security as part of the process. With good luck, it can be challenging. But basically, any organization that does software development requires this to some extent. There are also vendors that sell AppSec products, like code scanners, for example, and that can be like a slightly different career angle. Now, with so many different organizations doing continuous integration and continuous delivery, which is also known as CI/CD, security has to be an integral part, and this leads into this whole word you may have seen thrown around, DevSecOps. So what kind of skills? Programming and general development and software engineering skills. Obviously, if that's the world you're kind of wanting to fit into, you need to know kind of how software is developed, and you got to be able to write code and understand it. And this would generally require that you need deep knowledge of at least one major language. You probably want to have knowledge of vulnerabilities and how basic exploitation of those vulnerabilities works. These days, you need to know containers, like Docker, orchestration. You basically can't get away without that sort of stuff these days. And of course, cloud, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, etc. It's good to have knowledge of those, because those are a really deep part of the development process these days. And then you get into things like auditing and compliance. You're there to ensure organizations are being compliant with whatever standard they're required to. So the payment card industry data security standard, also known as PCI DSS, is kind of one of the more common ones you'll see talked about. There's certainly a lot more standards, and it does depend on the industry. So healthcare, for example, PHIPAA as an example. So large businesses have internal people to do this stuff, but there's lots of consulting work there. So in terms of what you need for skills, technical understanding is still really important here. Even if you aren't always hands-on, you're not really in like a quote-unquote technical role, you need to be able to understand the jargon and understand the impacts of certain technical things. Communication and report writing is really, really big. And you may detect a little bit of a theme here that communication and the ability to write and communicate properly is a really integral part. So we do focus a lot on the technical aspects, but the ability to write and communicate what you're doing, or and why you're doing it, is ridiculously important, not only for your organizations but for your career in general. And for that sort of auditing and compliance angle, you do need broad security knowledge. You need to be able to kind of understand something when you encounter it. Okay, so enough about the job specific stuff. Centrum, I see your question. I'll answer that after. Yeah, DevSecOps is not really an entry-level position, but yeah, we'll talk about that. So yeah, InfoSec and diversity. So the InfoSec and hacker community is full of a wide variety of people. It is, however, heavily dominated by white dudes like myself. The rest of the IT world is pretty much the same thing. with that being said, treat everyone with the utmost respect, regardless of race, creed, religion, gender identification, sexual preference, or even their technical ability. If you don't, leaders in the community will promptly call you out on it, and it will severely impact your career. I promise you that. If you, like me, are not part of minority, you don't get to tell people who belong to such groups how to feel about issues specific to them. You can signal boost their opinions as a sign of support, and also don't assume something is offensive to a particular group of people. So we've seen, if you go on Twitter, InfoSec Twitter enough, you generally can't go more than a few days without seeing some sort of drama. And I don't mean drama in a negative sense. I mean it more just that, like, something went down, and more often than not, someone has run afoul of one of these things that I've just mentioned. I and most of the community have zero tolerance for sexism, racism, or any other form of discrimination. It's still, unfortunately, very common in the online community, and especially on the chat platforms. So keep an eye on. Don't participate, please. And like, everyone's entitled to their opinions, but you know what? If you feel the need to express one of those opinions for your career's sake, I suggest you keep it to yourself. Okay, now, so that was kind of my segue into talking about the InfoSec community, which you are already participating in simply by watching this. The vast majority of important people in InfoSec are awesome and super approachable. Make connections and learn by being on Twitter, Slack, Discord, anything like that. When conferences in person are a thing again, you can make really amazing connections there too. For virtual conferences, which they're still definitely happening, a lot are kind of happening virtually or in a hybrid mode right now. Try to participate in online discussions, or even just send a thank you to speakers. But call it something specific that you liked about their talk, and that can maybe spur a little discussion. So where do you get started if you've just this is maybe your second week of school, and you're totally new to all this? Hop on Twitter, keep up on it just even a few minutes a day. Just scroll through. Again, you're not going to understand a lot of it, but you'll start to absorb. So you can hop onto my Twitter account. I have an InfoSec must follow list. I should probably update that, but I'll maybe in the next day or two add some more stuff to it. But if you just follow that list, you'll get all the updates. As far as interacting with the community, you know what? Go ahead, reach out to people on Twitter for advice and mentorship. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about mentorship in a bit. Participate in discussions when you feel comfortable doing it, even if it's only to ask clarifying questions. And be humble. Always be open to the chance that you're wrong about something, and be quick to defer to someone with more experience. And again, if you're just doing this industry, let's be real. Basically, everyone has more experience than you right now. So that's something you definitely want to take into account, especially in the early parts of your career. What you don't want to do, you don't want to use the community as your personal Google. If you've done, don't just ask someone, what's this, if you haven't bothered to search yourself in the first place. Don't demand things from people. Don't try to prove other people wrong constantly, or participate just to be critical. Even if you're right, it makes other people feel bad, and it makes you look like an asshole. So don't bother. Don't engage in user shaming. So what do we mean by that? User shaming is basically saying, stupid users always clicking on phishing emails, or clicking on links they're supposed to not supposed to do, or downloading things they're not supposed to. We designed computers to do these things. Like, emails are supposed to have links in them, and it's supposed to have pictures and attachments. Documents are meant to be open. So, we don't go around faulting users for our own engineering failures, right? So I equate this to basically being a doctor and making fun of patients for not knowing why they're sick, right? That's not, we can't know this stuff. That's why we have doctors who specialize in this kind of knowledge. And lastly, don't complain when someone posts things on social media that are not InfoSec related. We see this a lot. And unfortunately, it tends to target more towards women for some strange reason. Accept that people have diverse interests and frankly can post about whatever the heck they want. You don't have to follow them. If they're not talking about something you don't want to read about right now, you can mute them temporarily and unmute them later. You are not entitled to tell them what they should be talking about. All right, moving forward. So real-time chat platforms. Obviously, some of us are on Discord right now. Might be some of you on YouTube as well. You know, if you don't know about Discord, even though you're on it, you know, originally it's for gamers, and you know, it pretty quickly overtook Slack as the platform of choice for you know, InfoSec communities. We have text and voice chat, all sorts of lovely stuff, good clients, better moderation, nice, you know, bot platform, that kind of stuff. And you know, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't joined Discord yet, just check out the ISSessions website, and I believe the invite link is still on there. And in terms of other Discord servers, there's a number of like general InfoSec ones, and there's some more niche Discord servers around as well. Other chat platforms, Slack, generally invite only. Again, web, desktop, mobile clients. Technically, it's intended for teams of people who work together, but it's been co-opted for communities as well. And then we have Matrix. Matrix is essentially a modern replacement for internet relay chat. It's a decentralized system and supports very strong encrypted group and private chats. Element is the main client for Matrix. It's available for web, desktop, and mobile. The main drawback is that, in all honesty, like there isn't really a bustling InfoSec community going on there, at least not in terms of any openly public channels. But you know, there's always an opportunity to build something there. Blogs, lots of security blogs out there. Some are run by companies. They can potentially have an agenda, so just keep that in mind when you're reading some of these. There's a few great ones to start with. Honestly, most of those are actually posted in the news channel on Discord by the news bot. So you'll see the stories kind of pop up from here quite regularly. Only word of warning is the hacker news can sometimes be pretty clickbait heavy, but you know, their stories are still generally pretty decent. Conferences. So a lot of conferences are very expensive, like thousands of dollars. They are intended for industry people who are being paid to attend. You know, COVID has given a lot of opportunities to see conferences virtually for a lot less money or even free. Some conferences do provide student pricing or are generally inexpensive. In-person cons are, you know, once we're able to get back to those, they're critical for meeting people, and you do always learn something. So here's just a little, you know, quick list of our, you know, local-ish conferences. So there's Sector is kind of the big one in Canada. It's sort of like our Canadian Black Hat, let's say. B-Sides TO was not 2 weekends ago. I did this talk at a different time last year and forgot to update that one. That's what happens. So that's usually just before Sector as well, so it's going to be coming up pretty quickly here. It's inexpensive, it's small, it's a great place to meet people. I believe it's probably going to be virtual again this year. But once it's in person, it's usually like $30 or something to attend, so I highly, highly recommend, especially because it's local. Recon is typically every June in Montreal. It's a really hardcore, like, reverse engineering focused conference. I went a few years ago, and honestly, I understood so little of what was being talked about. It was crazy. Countermeasure in Ottawa. It's a big, you know, corporate type event, very expensive. Kind of more geared towards, I would say, kind of like executive types. And then there's NorthSec in Montreal, which is a conference and a huge CTF, which a few of us played in just in May, and it was super fun. Other major conferences, DEF CON, that's the big one. It's the biggest hacking convention in the world, and I'm going to differentiate hacking convention versus InfoSec. Hacking and InfoSec are, you know, intertwined, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So DEF CON is really a hacking convention, so to speak. And it's every August. You got to go at least once. I was planning on going on last year finally, and then, well, COVID happened. So Black Hat in Vegas. There's also Black Hat Europe in London, and there's also Black Hat in Asia as well. But the biggest one is the big one. B-Sides Las Vegas is also held during that time. It's a great alternative to Black Hat. And as I said, yeah, EU and Asia as well. There's also ShmooCon, which is a pretty cool con in January. Chaos Computer Club, which is basically the DEF CON of Europe. And there's tons of conferences. There's like one every week somewhere in the world, oftentimes more. And some of the conferences will have specialized purposes. Learning resources. So all of the conferences we talked about, most of the talks tend to become freely available online or even streamed live. Black Hat, for example, releases their videos usually months later, but they're available and you can watch them and learn from them. Online capture the flag stuff. I wouldn't say competitions because they're not necessarily competitions. You have Ring Zero Team, which is kind of one of my favorites. I don't think it's Ring Zero Team anymore, Ring Zero CTF, but it'll redirect to the right place. Over the Wire is really good. If you're just kind of starting out, especially with Linux command line, try out Bandit on Over the Wire. It's pretty cool. You'll learn some little, Linux command line tricks. Hack the Box. You got to do a little challenge to sign up. And so these are, so like Ring Zero and Over the Wire, you may have more of a focus on like reverse engineering type challenges. Hack the Box tends to be what I would call more of a penetration testing kind of CTF, where a lot of it is very much what I would call like a black box sort of approach, where you don't necessarily have access to code and you're acting like you're kind of a pen tester. Then we also have in-person CTFs. InfoSec, which, as I said, a bunch of us played in this year, and it was super fun. Even though it was like long hours, and my brain was done by the end of it. It was really, really fun. And then there's the Sheridan CTF, which we hold every year. And yeah, last year it was pretty awesome. So definitely look out for when we start doing signups and stuff like that, because you will want to play. It's going to be super fun. Even if you have no idea what you're doing, you will learn stuff, and it's going to be awesome. And then there's C3X. So C3X is kind of a special thing. It's almost like a competitive scenario that you kind of walk through. I volunteered for it this year, and yeah, it was really, really cool to watch. It was like this whole sort of fun incident that you had to kind of navigate through, and it gives that nice balance between like the business side of the industry as well as the technical stuff. More learning. So in general, I tend to learn towards topic-specific sites as opposed to a single place to learn a bunch of things. So in general, you're not going to find one source of like, teach me everything about InfoSec. It just doesn't exist. So if you're looking for knowledge, know what you're looking for to some extent. At least you need a topic or a specific piece of that topic, and then ask around. Ask on Discord, Twitter, etc. for recommendations. If you've exhausted your Googling. Lots of books. There's books for basically any topic you could possibly imagine. If you're looking for a book on a particular topic, just ask. As students, I believe you probably still have access to books 24/7. There's tons of stuff on there. Keep an eye on Humble book bundles. There's lots of programming and even security-related book bundles, humblebundle.com. Just little word to the wise on that. No starch bundles are amazing. If you don't own all of those books, buy them. The Packet, P-A-C-K-T, bundles are, from what I've been told, not so good, so I wouldn't necessarily waste your time. Some of your textbooks are actually going to be useful for a very, very long time. Honestly, I actually occasionally go back and refer to my operating system design textbook occasionally, because it does come in handy in my line of work. Certifications. Man, these memes are old at this point, aren't they? Okay, so certifications. You'll learn about the existence of a lot of certifications. You probably, already pretty overwhelmed with seeing all of them. There's, CISSP, SANS, GXpert, Security Plus, CEH, OSCP, OSCE, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do not worry about them at all until you are in the industry. Most of them are expensive, and when you're looking for your first job, there should be no expectation for you to have any certification whatsoever. Many employers will pay for your certifications if you present a good business case, and some professional services firms, consulting firms, will practically require you to get your CISSP once you have the work experience, and of course they'll pay for it, and they'll even pay to train you. My personal opinion on certs is generally pretty well known to those of you who have heard me talk about them. I think there's two purposes. It looks good to clients, and it looks good to prospective future employers looking for experienced hires. Notice I didn't say anything about learning stuff, because certs are not about learning things. I'll be completely blunt. Certs are about, proving some minimum level of knowledge. In general, there are some that may teach you something useful, but don't count on it. So OSCP and OSCE are good examples of certs that will force you to learn some useful new stuff. However, these days, because so many people have taken it, there's so many resources out there. I'll be honest, OSCP doesn't quite have the same pull that it used to, but it's still one of the better certs out there. I would agree. A good counterexample is CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, which is, if you read anything about the company that makes it, is very ironic having that word ethical in there. So the CEH is run by a company called EC Council. They are a terrible organization. They have a storied history of outright plagiarism and overt sexism, and I would not give them a dime of your money at all, ever, period. And I will just leave it at that. If you want me to send you a link of the 10-year history of them doing terrible things, please ask and I will send it to you. All right, career progression. Your first industry job. So right now, especially if you're like first year, second year, even third year, don't worry about it. In case you are worried about it, there's a mandatory 8-month co-op between third and fourth year. As long as you work hard during co-op, you will generally have a job waiting for you once you're done. This is by far the easiest way to jumpstart your career. You might not want to work there super long term, but the experience and contacts you make will open up your opportunities like crazy. If you have connections, use them. Cold applying for jobs rarely works these days. It's very, very challenging. It's easier once you're later in your career, when you have the experience, you have the resume built up, but early career cold applying is really brutal. So really quickly, I'll just run through, this was kind of mentioned, some of this was mentioned in my intro. This is my own personal experience. This is not reflective of what others went through or what will work for you. So, I entered the program with a bit of a head start. I was an older student for starters, so that does sometimes make life a little bit easier. I had 15 plus years of casual experience with Linux. I'd always tinkered with computers. I had no formal education or real programming experience, though. I did computer sales and repairs at Future Shop when it still existed. Between year 1 and 2 at school, I did some general IT work for a small company. A friend of mine happened to be the CTO. Use your connections. Somewhere between year 2 and 3, I did development work for a variety of kiosks at IBM. Again, I leveraged the connection to get an interview there, and then, interviewed, got me the actual job. For co-op, I worked for Deloitte on the consulting side, as opposed to their security operations center, which is located in Vaughan. I primarily worked in a security engineering type role in a client's security operations center. In general, I didn't really like the work itself that much, but I still arranged to work part-time during semester 7 and 8. If you don't need the money, I would say don't do it. After graduation, I stuck it out with Deloitte for a little while. I was able to transfer within the company to do vulnerability assessment and pen testing. Having that experience and them knowing the quality of work you do is good leverage. And you can say, hey, if you want me to stick around, transfer me over to this thing I'd rather be doing. After a short period of time, I realized it still wasn't quite the right thing for me, and I decided to start keeping my eyes and ears open for new opportunities. With roughly 2 years of not completely full-time experience, I was not only able to apply to positions that were not completely entry-level, and I had recruiters contacting me on top of that. I wound up with 2 offers at the same time for 2 very different positions. I went with my gut, and I'm still very happy with my choice 5.5 years later. So early career progression. So knowledge-wise, I would highly suggest start with breadth and then go depth, and you'll see this echoed a lot. Some people call this like the T engineer. So you have this big wide T at the top, and this is all the things that you know a little bit about, and then you can go deep on certain things, and what you learn in depth will change over time, and you may start to go in depth on one particular thing and realize I'm not really that into this. You can change. So that's the key. But that breadth of knowledge is key to, learning new things, easier and faster, because you're not starting from scratch. Early career interviews also, they tend to involve general questions about a wide array of relevant topics. So, they may ask questions that seem really random, but, the job does involve a wide variety of different things. You also want to prevent yourself from getting stuck doing something you don't. So again, if you commit really early on to just really focusing on one narrow area, and you soon realize that actually working in that area is not so fun, you've now made it really difficult for yourself to pivot out of that role without a lot of extra work. You may have already chosen a specialization, but don't close off your other options until you've actually worked in that job for a year or two. That's what happened to me with pen testing. I thought that was the only thing I wanted to do, and in all honesty, it wasn't for me. Some career paths in general also tend to be really good for generalists. People who just keep that broad knowledge, and maybe instead of a T, you've got like, I don't know, let's call it like an underscore that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you're just building that broad knowledge set. You go a little bit deeper over time. So about mentoring. So this is something that's really we've been seeing, especially through COVID. We've been seeing a lot of this stuff online of people offering to be mentors. So you'll see, every once in a while, you'll see industry professionals openly volunteering and say, hey, I'm open. I have availability to mentor like 2 people or whatever. There's even people that'll facilitate threads to help mentors and mentees link up. Tanya, She Hacks Purple, she does this on a really regular basis. Honestly, probably every couple of weeks, you may see her do a thread. And so you'll see she'll retweet different people, and you can just look at the thread and see like people that are looking to be mentors and people that are looking to find a mentor. So a couple of things to keep in mind. If you do reach out to a mentor, be very respectful of their time. We're all very busy people, and they are, taking time out of their spare time to be able to help you out, literally out of the kindness of their heart. If you do commit to doing something at the advice of your mentor, follow through. Even if you, reach out to someone and you say, hey, you know what? You have a quick little conversation and they say, yeah, send me an email and, with what you want to accomplish. Do that. Actually follow through and do it. You wouldn't believe how many times I see someone say, I had 4 people reach out to me saying they wanted a mentor, and then when I tried to follow up with them, I got crickets, right? So they're there to help you with your career and help guide you and help give you advice. So, take full advantage of that. And most importantly, don't be afraid to reach out to someone who is openly offering it. Like they are offering it for a reason. They're not going to be mean to you. They're not going to shame you. They're there to help. So I know it seems like it's kind of jumping around a little bit. That's just kind of the nature of how the industry goes. So, when we're all stuck working from home, taking classes from home, I know you guys are kind of doing the hybrid thing right now, but burnout is super, 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 super common in our industry. Even if you love the work you do, it's still stressful, it's mentally taxing, it takes a lot out of you. And again, you spend enough time on Twitter, and honestly, you'll see a lot of people that are just obviously going through some form of burnout. The frequency and speed at which people reach burnout is inevitably going to increase with this kind of switch to work from home. So here's kind of my set of personal rules for preventing a complete breakdown due to burnout. And in all honesty, in the last year and a half, I've struggled with following my own rules. It does happen, but you need to set those boundaries for yourself. So don't make it a habit of working longer than you're expected to. Stuff does happen. If it happens several times a week, it does need to be brought up with your supervisor. When you're done work, don't reply to any work-related emails or messages unless that's explicitly something you signed on for. Like if you're on call for the night or whatever, then yeah, obviously you need to do that. But in general, you need to draw that line because your employer will not. Take your vacation time. Minimum 1 consecutive week, 0 work at all. Do not check your emails, do not check your messages, nothing. Don't do stuff you should be getting paid for in your current role as a hobby. Your brain needs a break. So For me, when I was, doing pen testing and stuff like that, and it wasn't quite scratching that technical itch for me, I was still going and playing CTFs and doing stuff in my spare time. But as soon as I started doing work that really satisfied that technical side for me, as soon as 5 o'clock rolled around, I step away from the computer, I go home, I hang out on the couch and I watch TV, and I don't do the technical stuff at that point. And that's been really, really helpful just with the overall balance in my life. So making your way through the program. So in case you weren't already aware, the program is very rigorous and challenging. Don't let the fact that you're at Sheridan College and not U of T or like a prestigious comp sci school like Waterloo fool you into complacency. The program, in my opinion, does require full-time job hours when you combine in-class time and classwork, study, and reading time. Depending on your current level of knowledge, first year may or may not feel like this, but don't expect second year to be the same. So for me, as I said, I came in, I felt like I had a bit of a head start tech-wise, but second year absolutely crushed me in comparison to first year. For you younger folks, many of you have maybe come straight out of high school, or you're just like me and you kind of act like you're still in high school. There won't necessarily be a lot of required work that counts for marks, but don't let that fool you into not doing the work. Read the recommended textbooks, make notes while you're reading. If you don't make notes, you're not going to retain anything at all. If you're just learning programming, so programming is new to you, write a lot of code. You have to. You got to do it every day. You take exercises from the textbook and do them. Come exam and assignment time, you will thank me. You need to write a lot of code because there are a lot of programming classes, and you got to do it. Okay. So here's some recommendations for your in-class time. So I do make these recommendations as the person in my graduating class. I had the highest cumulative GPA. I worked my ass off. It is not intended as a brag. It is meant to just kind of say, what, this is what I did, and clearly it did something for me. And I know, again, if with the hybrid model, this can be a little tricky, but for in class, you can follow this to the letter. For your online classes, you can follow some of these things. So first off, close all non-essential windows and mute notifications. Focus mode on Windows 10, do not disturb on Mac. My worst grade in class is literally because I was focused on my laptop, doing like tinkering with some random thing for one 3-hour class. And that one 3-hour class happened to cover like half of the final exam. And so that did not wind up good for me. Write your notes by hand. Now, again, everyone's different. Everyone finds their own way. But there is research to show that you do learn more by writing by hand due to differences in cognitive processing. And for me personally, I found that I retained information a lot better when I wrote notes physically, even if I didn't necessarily go back and read them. Just the act of writing helped me process the information better. Also, when you're in classes, ask clarifying questions if you've been paying attention. If you know you gapped out for a few minutes, wait till a break or the end of class to clarify with the professor. In your non-class time, find classmates to study with and share knowledge. Helping each other understand concepts will greatly enhance everyone's understanding. Explaining something to someone else is oftentimes the best way to enhance your own understanding of it. Read ahead whenever possible. If you have time, if you feel like, oh, a really light workload, yeah, go play some games, go do whatever, but take some of that spare time to read ahead and get yourself prepared. And do not leave anything to the last minute. Something will go wrong 100% of the time. Well, not 100%, but a lot of the time. Something will go wrong, I promise. Balance and priorities. Procrastination is going to get you. We're all guilty of it. I personally struggled with it a lot. If you're a gamer like me, use game time as a reward for completing something. If you game first, you're not going to stop. You're not going to get your stuff done. You're going to realize at like 3 a.m. That, oh shit, I need to get this thing done by like 9 a.m. which leads me to don't sacrifice sleep and food. This really impacts your ability to learn and comprehend, and you do need your brain working at full capacity. If you're privileged enough not to need to work a part-time job, please don't. Yeah, the extra money is nice and all, but if you're living at home and your parents are covering everything, then I would suggest you don't work just because of how strenuous this program can be. If you do need to work, and some of us do, I needed to, you will need to become a master at scheduling everything in your life, and you do have to kind of have the discipline to stick to that schedule. Okay, let's talk about your reputation in the context of school. Information security is a very small community. Sheridan alumni or people who know Sheridan alumni are everywhere. The reputation you create for yourself in school will follow you for a long, long, long time. For me personally, I'm now directly involved in interviewing and hiring. There's plenty of other Sheridan alumni in similar positions. So, word can get around quite easily. We can reach out to a few people and ask, oh, hey, do you know anything about this person? And we'll find out. So, be aware of that when it comes to how you conduct yourself, around your classmates. Having a reputation for working your ass off is more valuable than having amazing grades. Yeah, you can always shoot for both. Nothing wrong with that. And how to not piss people off. Be dependable. If you agree to a deadline with anyone, whether it's a professor on an extended deadline, whether it's your classmates on deadlines for a group project, stick to it. Also, don't be a leech. You're not going to actually learn anything. People are going to resent you. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know something. Offer to help figure it out. Also, something to keep in mind, people don't like to be told they're wrong. Sometimes they are, legitimately. You have to be very careful with how you handle this. Don't just, throw it in their face. Lean on a reputable third-party source to help with this. And, just, again, we're all here to learn. We're all here to, make a good career and a good living for ourselves. We're all trying to do the same thing. So, just, be nice about it when you have to kind of tell someone that, hey, actually, I think it's this. Continuing on with how not to be a jerk, just listen to people a lot. Listen to what they're saying. You'll learn things. You'll learn about why people behave the way they do. And you'll learn how to interact with people better. And most of your job is going to be interacting with people, really. Stay out of the gossip if you can. Even if you feel the same way about a particular person, take the high road. Just keep it to yourself. And this is not the same as honest, well thought out criticism. If you're honestly saying, hey, look, you're having like a bit of a heart to heart to someone, you're saying like, I just noticed you're struggling with this, those kinds of things are fine. You're genuinely trying to help, but just criticism and gossip for the sake of, talking about someone, really, it's not going to get you anywhere in this industry. So in general, like treat school a bit like a workplace, but you can have a bit more fun than you would in a workplace. It's okay to be ridiculous and joke around and stuff, but know when to turn it off and be serious and professional and get down to work. Okay, so remember that whole diversity thing I talked about way earlier. Our program, in my experience, has had pretty decent racial diversity compared to, say, like the average Silicon Valley startup. The Toronto tech scene in general is actually pretty decent as far as racial diversity goes. But we do have serious issues with gender diversity, as I'm sure you've noticed in your classes. Unfortunately, this sometimes has led to some less than awesome treatment of our female colleagues. Understand that not everyone in the program is here. I challenge all of you to call out sexist and other discriminatory behavior, set a good example for your peers who aren't here to listen to me rant. And yeah, this is tremendously important. And for me personally, I see this on the, especially on the hiring end, and as well as the makeup of a particular team. Having a good balance of people from different walks of life, different genders, different races, different life experience makes for a stronger, better team, and you will actually have way more fun working with a wide variety of people. So yeah, I think it's really important that we make sure, especially in school, that we're providing kind of that supportive environment for everybody. And in that vein as well, so there's a much lower number of women in the program than men. women have just as much right to be in this program as you. If a female classmate rejects your romantic advances or seems horribly uncomfortable, apologize and leave them the fuck alone. I cannot stress this any stronger. And honestly, I say this because of things that I know have happened in the past. This is not some sort of conjecture. These are things that have happened that I'm aware of. They have happened. They will continue to happen. Don't be that person. And, you know, as people in InfoSec, we become privy to a lot of knowledge that can be misused, such as if you get into doing open source intelligence, also known as OSINT, you know, please, for the love of God, don't use these skills to like stalk your love interest or like do harm to people. You know, really, really tremendously important. And that is it for me. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, if you have any questions about anything at all, please reach out to me on Twitter, Discord. I may not always answer right away, but I will always try my best to answer. And also, by the way, if you do reach out to me and I don't reply at all, please reach out to me again. I do forget things sometimes, so please, yeah, be persistent with me. I'm not rejecting you. I just forgot.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Are you open to take any questions if anyone has?
Absolutely.
Okay, so feel free to send a message in stream chat if you would like to ask a question.
Yeah, so anyone has questions, just tag me and I will answer. Oh, so Centrum, I'll actually answer. So DevSecOps, that's a tricky one. So I would say, so a lot of people in kind of DevSecOps kind of come from a development background of doing software development. So I would say if you're coming more from kind of the security angle, that's where you want to start getting into what does the development lifecycle look like. You know, try and get yourself into a position or learn from people where you know, they're involved in the development of something and they can, you know, teach you about the different processes and stuff like that. Tanya Janka, She Hacks Purple, she's all about AppSec. So follow her. She has a really awesome book that I actually am going to be picking up shortly. I think it's Alice and Bob Learn AppSec or something of that sort. Off the top of my head, I may have gotten that wrong, but that's a really, really cool, yeah, I think that's a really good place to start with kind of learning, you know, how AppSec and DevSecOps works. All right. Any questions? Anybody? It can be like, you know, even just questions about my experiences, specific questions, etc.
I just want to say, like, thank you so much, especially for the last little bit, about, like, girls in InfoSec and, like, diversity in InfoSec. Just, like, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, you know, my whole thing is I pretty much have every privilege assigned to me under the sun. So, you know, I feel obligated to use that to, you know, try to make it a little easier for everyone else. And again, because I've you know, I have enough friends in the industry, and I've heard enough horror stories, and you see them on Twitter all the time too. So, you know, like our industry is never going to get better if we don't make it better for everyone to join and participate. So, pro tip for first year students. You know, again, don't let if you have some experience with tech, I think I remember seeing that you have your CCNA, you know, so you've got some experience with tech. Some of the stuff first year may come really easy to you. Just be warned that it won't stay like that. Second year will come up on you very, very hard, and it will get very in depth very quickly. Yeah, I might do NSEC again. We'll see. that was a lot. That was tiring. Things that people should do during their school career to help them get a job after they graduate. You know what? Participate in conferences. Keep up on the industry. Just again, Twitter. Just be aware. You don't have to know everything about everything, but if someone starts talking about something, you can say, "Oh yeah, I heard about that," and that can start a conversation. Conversations lead to connections with people. Connections with people lead to other connections, and you'd be amazed how quickly you can land yourself into a job that you never thought possible, just because, hey, I talked to this one person about this thing. And so once we're back to in-person conferences, as I said, like B-Sides is a really great place to kind of start out with that. Co-op placement for third-year students, just follow what the co-op, what they teach you in the co-op class. Honestly, it's not rocket science. They'll teach you all about doing your resumes. Yeah, just literally just follow what they say. They know what they're doing. The co-op office has been doing this for a very long time, and they know what's going on. As far as jobs in general, though, this one I actually didn't mention, and I kind of want to. Tailor your resumes for every single job you are applying for, and read the job posting in detail. If you don't know what something is on a job posting, go learn about it. I'll be completely honest, this has been an incredibly frustrating thing for me, interviewing people that have no idea what they're interviewing for. And that is like you're not going to get a job if you haven't done a little bit of research on what it is you're applying for. And if your resume doesn't have anything of relevance to the job itself. And so that doesn't mean you need professional experience that's relevant. It just means that, put some interests in, put some things you've looked into, if you've played in some CTFs, put some things in there somewhere that's of relevance to the job you're applying for. And I know early career, you're not going to have the professional experience, but, point to some projects you've done, relevant projects you've done, with your coursework and that kind of stuff. But really, every single different job you apply for, tailor it.
Okay, I think
Anybody else?
One more question, if anybody has. I'll give it a minute.
Yeah, I mean, similar to after you graduate, leverage your connections, tailor your resumes, and in all honesty, like if you get an offer from your co-op employer, unless it was a super toxic workplace, I would just highly suggest, like even if you don't really like it that much, stick it out for so you get like maybe 1.5 to 2 years under your belt, and then it becomes so much easier to get in, just about anywhere else at that point. Demand and financial point of view. Ooh. So I mean, AppSec is big right now. It's a bit steep. I would say I would say probably the vast majority of the work in Toronto tends to be, kind of on the pen testing sort of side or on the sort of SOC analyst defensive side. There's also a lot of like incident response type stuff as well. Whereas, like vulnerability research, for example, I'll be completely honest, as far as I know, like my team at Trend Micro is the only game in town. So, if you have a very hyper-specific interest like I did, it can be a lot more challenging. But now things have very much changed in the last 1.5 years when it comes to work. So remote work is substantially more common. So the other thing to keep in mind is that salaries in the United States are significantly higher than they are in the Toronto area or in Canada in general. So if that's something that you're wanting to do or willing to do, keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that, cost of living, depending on where they want you to live, may be significantly higher as well. So it all kind of balances. Some of it kind of balances out, but in general, the U.S. does tend to pay. U.S. companies do tend to pay, I would say, on average, like a 30 to 40% premium, especially once you get into experienced roles. But in general, I wouldn't pick any one particular career path. Pick what you're interested in. That's where you're going to make the best career for yourself, financially or otherwise. If you force yourself into something because, I'll make more money doing this, you're going to burn out super fast, and you're going to regret doing it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, for the presentation today and everything you do for the community. It's always a pleasure having you.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for listening to me ramble as always.
It's not rambling when it's quality.
If you say so.
And thanks everyone for staying with us tonight. That wraps up tonight's presentation. And we'll post. We'll actually post a survey to get some feedback with regards to how everything went. So please feel free to answer the survey. I think Christian will post it shortly. There we go. So have a good night, everyone. Thanks again.